Hello everyone, this is part 28 of What If Naruto Passed the Genin test, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. After we left Suna, Jiraiya and I began to head north. We didn't know exactly where we were going, but we knew that eventually we'd run across some trail of Orochimaru's, Naruto said, leaning back a bit on the comfortable couch. For a while we meandered around the Wind's villages, just living day-to-day life like a couple of vagabonds. Sakura turned around and sat down next to Naruto on the couch, inwardly delighted that her guest had gone for the idea of moving to the living room to talk and catch up. It was easily the most relaxed room in the house, with a trio of chairs circled around a coffee table, and the couch against the eastern wall, facing the big window on the western wall. The girl made a point not to sit too close to Naruto, not wanting to make him feel at all uncomfortable, but at the same time, after she'd sat down, Sakura subtly shifted just a little closer. Naruto didn't seem to either notice or take offense to that, as he simply went on with his narrative. The whole time Jiraiya was teaching me all kinds of techniques. Most of it was offensive ninjutsu, like moves to really take the fight to the enemy and end it quickly. But there were times when he would totally shift gears and train me in how to use some pretty advanced genjutsu too. Like what? Sakura asked curiously. Well, there's this one where I create an illusion that it's foggy and there's a lot of mist. And while that's going on, I'm actually casting a mist jutsu and combining it with a technique that creates wind, said Naruto. The result is that the real mist starts whipping around in the wind while the fake mist is just kinda floating around. And, Sakura stammered, confused, what good does that do? Naruto grinned just a little as he took a sip from the glass of water Sakura had brought him a few minutes before. It's hard to explain what it looks like, said the blonde, but when Jiraiya demonstrated it to me, it was very strange. The layered genjutsu, as he called it, is incredibly disorienting. I'll have to take your word on that, said Sakura with a shrug. And that was one of the more simple ones, Naruto continued. Jiraiya knows illusions that are 5 and 6 layers thick. Granted, he can't perform them well, but he knows the concepts and theories. At any rate, after we'd been wandering about a month, we ran across a lead on a sound spy running around in the Earth country, so we headed off in that direction. We got lucky and found one of the Earth's ninja in a bar, who had recently been tracking the spy we were after. Fortunately, the nin thought we were just harmless travelers, and as he was drunk at the time, so he didn't hesitate to divulge some of the secrets of his operation when Jiraiya had me test out one of the new genjutsu on our friend. Long story short, we picked up the chase and soon caught up to the spy. For the sake of inter-village relations though, Jiraiya said we had to wait until he actually did something illegal before we could take him down and question him. So you sat around and spied on a spy? Sakura asked, sounding a little irritated. Basically yeah, shrugged Naruto. Sounds frustrating. It was, said Naruto, but as seemed to happen a lot, Jiraiya and I got lucky again. After we'd been watching him for a few days, a mercenary ninja attacked the spy and took him out in a flash. Why? Asked the kunoichi, raising an eyebrow. I'm getting there, said Naruto with a grin. That's exactly what Jiraiya and I wanted to know when we revealed ourselves and asked the mercenary what his business was. At first he hesitated to tell us anything, especially after the old pervert mentioned that we were actually Leaf Nin, but as soon as I mentioned that we were on the trail of one of Orochimaru's servants, he instantly warmed up to us. Sakura sat back and crossed her arms, staring intently at Naruto. Okay, she probed, why did he like hearing that? Turns out that he was an affiliate of the Crane organization, an elite group of ninja mercenaries that work in secret for the highest bidder, and let me tell you, they don't work cheap. I've never heard of them, said Sakura. What did they have against Orochimaru? Nothing personal as far I know, Naruto shrugged. They work for money, not personal convictions or vendettas. Someone, apparently someone obscenely rich, hired the organization to track down, question, and eliminate Sound Ninja. And what did the three of you do with this particular Sound Nin? We persuaded him to tell us what he'd been doing in the Earth country, who he was spying on, and things like that. It was nothing worth pursuing. The mercenary did most of the work, and after it was all said and done he invited Jiraiya and I to follow him to his superior officer for a chat, as he put it. Sakura raised an eyebrow. Really? We decided there was no harm in following him, and traveled to the nearby village of Kedahias, the Crane's base of operation in Earth. Now the Crane organization makes no secret of their work if someone asks them a direct question, but they do make an effort to ensure that no one knows enough about them to ask a direct question, said Naruto. They're a relatively quiet bunch, but when we arrived in Kedahias, the mercenary we'd met earlier, by now he'd said his name was Indo, took us to meet his boss of sorts, the head of the Crane in Earth. Just like that? Asked Sakura, seems sudden. I thought you said they were a secretive group of people. I did, and they normally are, but according to the boss, our reputation as elite ninja who had a bone to pick with Orochimaru had preceded us. The chief offered us a position within the Crane then and there. Were they desperate for personnel? No, answered Naruto casually. As it turns out, the Crane had actually been carefully following Jiraiya and I since sooner as potential recruits, also the chief told us. He said that as soon as we entered the Earth country his spies had spotted us and immediately identified Jiraiya. Whether or not the chief was being honest I don't know, but regardless, he somehow knew that the old pervert was at odds with Orochimaru, and that was enough for him to want to hire us. Like I mentioned, the Crane had been hired to attack Orochimaru's network of spies and ninja, and since that was one of our goals anyway we joined up with them. Sakura leaned back and crossed her arms. You hired yourself out as a mercenary, she said, a hint of distaste in her mouth. Yep, said the blonde disaffectedly. It was mostly for political reasons. As ninja of Konoha, if we openly attacked Orochimaru's ninja it could start a war. As members of the Crane organization, a group of mercenaries, granted an international and very organized group of mercenaries, but hired blades nonetheless, no one could tie our actions back to Konoha with the current international laws. Everything we did while under the umbrella of the organization was technically for the organization alone. Mercenaries are considered rogue unless they've been hired by a recognized country. Otherwise they're terrorists, and the Crane assured us that their client wasn't a recognized country. Naruto's voice trailed off just a bit at the end of his speech, looking out the window like he was trying to recall something. Sakura grinned just a little. So Jiraiya found a loophole thanks to vague international laws, she commented. Nice move. Actually, said Naruto, I was the one who found the obscurity in the books. For just a moment the kunoichi sat on the couch and looked at Naruto dumbly. You've street USD international law? She asked. I had no idea you were interested in that kind of thing. When did you have time? After all, there are literally hundreds of volumes of it. Really I could care less, and I didn't read all of it of course, just enough, said Naruto. I thought it might come in handy to know at some point. It looks like I was right. He smirked just a little. And this was all within a month of leaving Konoha? Sakura asked, still surprised. When did you find the time to? I mean, weren't you busy training or something? It was something to do just randomly when I got the chance, like when Jiraiya had a bunch of adolescent girls over. I did it in small increments, Naruto responded, taking another sip of water. Along with studying few other mind-numbingly boring subjects. Sakura didn't answer and Naruto began to wonder if he'd offended her somehow. I'm sorry, he said, did I say something wrong? Not at all, Sakura stammered, you just never seemed the type really make yourself study rather than have fun. Don't get me wrong, I mean that in the best way, but even so. You always hated to read in the academy. Actually I love to read, said Naruto, keeping a grin off his face. I was really quite the history addict. Iruka and I would always discuss some old text or history book when he took me out for ramen or when none of the other students were around. I never knew that, said the kunoichi, feeling herself blush with embarrassment. You never asked, said Naruto. But then again neither did most other people so it's no big deal. It's interesting, said the kunoichi. Not really, said Naruto, either not noticing or not caring as Sakura scooted in a little closer. I think it is, she said in a slightly lower tone. You're strange, said Naruto, bearing a grin. Sakura shrugged. She didn't answer, but decided that it wasn't worth getting angry about having just been insulted. Granted, she just accidentally insulted Naruto, but it wasn't the same. Nevertheless, she didn't answer but rather just watched him for a moment, wondering what he was thinking. Naruto shifted on the couch but didn't move any farther away or closer to the kunoichi. Should I go on? Why does she keep scooting closer? Naruto wondered. Please don't tell me she means this to be a romantic encounter, how awkward. You can if you want, said Sakura, her eyes locked on Naruto either on purpose or by instinct. Enough, Naruto thought as Sakura leaned just a little bit closer to him. What do you want? He asked in response, his voice sudden but controlled, and uncharacteristically smooth. It made her blush. The kunoichi couldn't decide whether the grin that flitted across Naruto's lips was sultry or innocent, but the sudden break in pace made her sit back up straight. Before she could answer though, Sakura was interrupted by a loud knock on her front door. She turned to Naruto and looked at him before glancing back to the door again. Should I just pretend we're not here and hope they go away? Asked Sakura as whoever it was knocked again. You should probably answer it, said the blonde flatly. This has the potential to go south quickly. Naruto mentally kicked himself but didn't show anything outwardly. It's too early to even guess at anything, but has she been trying to win me over romantically this whole time? Probably not, but if that does turn out to be the case that would be bothersome. Fine, said the kunoichi, a little disappointed as she got to her feet and crossed the living room. Miss Haruno, are you in there? Asked a voice nervously, just as Sakura pulled the door open in an unnecessarily quick motion. Oh, blurted a nervous-looking teenage boy, probably around 13 or 14 years old, standing in Sakura's door. He was about a foot shorter than Naruto and about even with the kunoichi. I didn't realize you had company, he said, glancing warily at Naruto, not sure what to make of the dangerous-looking stranger. Let's have it, said Sakura levelly. What is it, Amura? Naruto glanced between the newcomer and Sakura, wondering if he should say anything or just sit quietly and observe. There was obviously no real threat from the boy, but 3 years of training don't just fade overnight. Judging from the look of fear in Amura's eyes, Naruto guessed the boy was actually afraid of him. I'm sorry to interrupt, said Amura, scratching his brown hair. But Tsunade requested you. She said it was of the utmost importance and if you weren't there in 20 minutes there was going to be hell to pay. Those were her words, not mine, Amura stuttered to clarify quickly. Thank you, said Sakura curtly, as she stepped back and closed the door in the boy's face with a loud slam. Memories of how Shikamaru described Sakura suddenly sprung into Naruto's mind as he watched her interaction, if one could really even call it that, with the page, and the shift in her now stiff posture as she walked back to the couch and picked up Naruto's glass of water while he watched passively. Care to join me? Asked Sakura over her shoulder. I suppose I could, said Naruto as Sakura disappeared into the kitchen. After all, I'd rather not inflame one so prone to mood swings. Good, said the kunoichi as she set the solitary glass down in the kitchen sink. I was hoping you'd say that. SC. Tsunade, Jiraiya, Kakashi, Guy, and several other Junin along with no less than 10 Anbu, including Shikamaru, were all gathered in the Hokage's office by the time Sakura and Naruto arrived. Most of the Junin were standing with Tsunade around her desk, and the Anbu had stationed themselves around the less than massive room, making the office seem even more crowded. Also, Naruto noticed immediately, Chuji and 2 other ninja in town guard uniforms were there, standing off behind Tsunade. Everyone seemed to cast long shadows in the unusually dimly lit room as the whole gathering turned to face the new arrivals. Shikamaru and Chuji nodded to Naruto. Both looked glad to see him, though Chuji also looked pleasantly surprised. Apparently, Naruto thought, Chuji hadn't figured out I was back, and seeing as how he must have known Jiraiya was here, he didn't know the 2 of us left together. I wonder how quiet Tsunade kept our mission. Kakashi also looked over from his place beside the Hokage's desk and acknowledged Naruto with a covert smile under his mask. The copy nin didn't look quite right though. There was some type of anxiety on his face that Naruto had never seen there before, but he couldn't place it. The whole room, he noticed, seemed painted with that same unease. There was a very low, dull hum as the room buzzed with several different hushed conversations. A few of the Anbu were speaking with the Junin who weren't gathered around Tsunade. Chuji was speaking with the other guards, and Kakashi looked to be having a very delicate conversation with Jiraiya. Strangely enough, Guy was the only one among those gathered that stood silently by himself. Tsunade looked up from a large spread of papers and what looked to be a map on her desk, and glanced between Naruto and Sakura for a moment. Looks from annoyance to gratitude flitted across her face, though it was more than obvious that there was something on her mind. Not that I'm not glad to have you back, Naruto, the Hokage said with fake pleasure in her voice, but you weren't invited. This is a meeting for all the elite Genin and top members of the Special Tactics and Forces Unit. Genin, muttered Naruto, turning slightly to Sakura. You didn't ask, she whispered back, before she turned to address Tsunade. It was my idea, Hokage-sama. I invited him along. Tsunade looked sternly at Sakura for just a moment, then turned to Jiraiya, who didn't return the gesture, but rather stared down coldly at the map on the desk. He can be here though, said the Hokage. Actually, I should be glad you brought him along. This does partially concern him after all. How so? Asked Naruto, interrupting. We'll talk about that later, said Tsunade, cutting Sakura off before the pink-haired Kunoichi could say anything, but right now I need to have Sakura over here. Naruto, feel free to entertain yourself. Just don't leave, I'll need a word with you in a few moments. Naruto nodded with a slight bow of respect. Sakura did likewise and walked over to Tsunade's side. Instantly she was submerged in the quiet conversation taking place. Seeing nothing better to do, as everyone else seemed busy, Naruto walked to a corner and set his back in it. He glanced around the room, hoping no one would pay attention to him, but not really caring that a few of the Anbu were stealing quick glances his way. He wondered if he was the subject of some debate of theirs. Good to have you back, a very smooth but hushed voice said from right beside Naruto. Good to be back, Kakashi-sensei, said Naruto, not so much as flinching. I get the feeling something's wrong, seeing as how everyone is on edge and whispering. What's going on, or is it any of my business? Oh, it's most definitely your business, said Kakashi quietly, not looking away from the Hokage's crowded group. And if it's not now, it will be in the very near future. As for everyone being on edge, you might be too if you were in our position. And just what is our position? Asked Naruto. Trouble with sound. Kakashi turned and looked around the room at all of the solemn faces. If it were just that simple, no one would be this grim. No, Orochimaru isn't helping the situation at all, but the real issue is with the water, the lightning, and the wind countries. War? Asked Naruto bluntly. That's a distinct possibility, muttered the copy nin. I knew there were rumors of war going around like wildfire, and I heard relations were bad between water and wind. I also heard and that sound would take water's side if war broke out, but what's this about lightning? The Raikage just came out and announced today, began Kakashi with a cynical tone in his voice, that if sound enters any conflict on water's behalf, he is going to launch the Cloud's armies in a joint strike with Kiri against Suna. 3 on 2, said Naruto, already adjusted to the idea of international conflict, that is assuming that we would still come to Suna's aid. Everyone knows we would instantly take Suna's side. Together we'd have a nearly impregnable defensive force, said Kakashi, and the Earth country would be neutral, so there's no issue there. The problem is Orochimaru. With him involved, there's no hope of ever resolving anything with politics. Meaning that if it really does break out, it could stretch on longer than any of the past ninja wars. What does anyone stand to gain? Asked Naruto. If we could sort that out and figure a way to compromise with everyone, we could stop it before things start. Kakashi nodded towards the Hokage's group gathered around the map. That's basically what they're working on, said the Junin. But the problem is that Kiri is demanding that Gaara step down as Kazekage and that Suna agree to pay massive reparations to Kiri for the last war. On top of it all, they want the wind to give up thousands of square miles of land for the water to set up forts around Suna. That's absurd. Why would they ask for that? Asked Naruto. They were allies in the last war and Gaara hasn't done anything to Kiri. Because it will never happen, groaned Kakashi. Remember, Orochimaru is involved here. He's the one pulling the Mizukage's strings, we're sure of it, and he wants a war. Also, I think Orochimaru has control of the Raikage's cabinet of advisors. I'd bet my new edition of Ika Ika Purgatory on it. Well, no, actually I wouldn't, but you get the idea. Yeah, muttered Naruto. I get it. So when you said war was a distinct possibility, you meant it's going to happen. Maybe, maybe not, said Kakashi. What Tsunade hopes to do is convince the Cloud that a war would destroy them. Our sources know for a fact that Orochimaru has the Mizukage in his back pocket, so there's no real way to convince the water not to do whatever that bastard snake tells them to, but if the Raikage backs down or takes our side, then it would make things a hell of a lot easier. It might even force Orochimaru to delay his plans, whatever they are. Do you think we can convince the Raikage to back off? Asked Naruto. Kakashi hesitated for a moment. Personally, no, he said solemnly, so war is looking more and more probable. Unless we take out Orochimaru, muttered Naruto. Kakashi flinched. Do you think we're not considering that? Asked the Genin. That was one of the first things Tsunde's advisors suggested. The only problem is that we haven't had the opportunity or the power to strike directly at him, not since you and Jiraiya left. Naruto grinned ferally. There was a sudden spark in his eyes that lightened his whole countenance. I think I like where this is going, said the blonde Genin in an undertone. That doesn't sound like Naruto at all, thought the Genin. Don't get ahead of yourself, said Kakashi. Our first defense is always diplomacy. Right now we need to do everything we can to prevent a war, not start one. No matter how useless I think it may be, we need to work on securing the Cloud's loyalties. Unless Orochimaru has the Raikage paid too well too. Naruto groaned. In which case we're wasting valuable time. Tsunade doesn't think so, said Kakashi. The Raikage is too set in his ways to change his personal beliefs. Remember that he was Konoha's supporter during the last war before he came to power as a Kage. The Cloud's advisory board, however, is a major political power in that part of the world, and that's why we think they're the ones under Orochimaru's control, not the Raikage. But even so, he may be willing to listen to them over his own reason. Not a good situation, in any case, mumbled Naruto. What about some of the lesser ninja villages? There are several springing up in the south and west of the Earth country. Whose side are they on? Sound, said Kakashi. A budding ninja village needs money, and Orochimaru apparently has a lot of it. He's buying himself alliances. Where is he getting all this capital? Asked Naruto. Building armies, paying off cages and politicians, buying alliances, this has got to be an expensive business. Officially we don't know, but everyone who knows about the current situation has their own theories. What's yours? Asked Naruto. Personally, yeah, Naruto clarified. I can't help but wonder if he's being financed by the Crane organization. Kakashi said. I've never trusted them. They play dirty and aren't afraid to ignore the law to accomplish their ends. Impossible, said Naruto. Jiraiya and I worked for the Crane organization. You did, Kakashi said, surprise obvious in his voice though he physically displayed nothing. For more than 2 years, said the Genin. They were being paid massive amounts of money to hunt down Orochimaru's ninja. I personally killed some of his best agents while under the Crane's direct orders. There goes that theory, muttered the Genin. But I guess it doesn't matter at this point. Things are too heated right now, and even if we could cut off his supply of money it would only serve to make him push his plans harder. Without knowing Orochimaru more intimately than I do, I can't say, said Naruto. But, wouldn't it be funny if the ones financing Orochimaru's effort are the same ones contracting the Crane to harass his lines? What makes you say that? Asked Kakashi. Nothing really, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said shrugging. I just thought it would be interesting if there was someone in the background trying to pull all of the strings at once, then cover their own asses with even more string pulling that counteracted their earlier actions without totally undoing them. Kakashi was silent for a moment, then, I don't think there's anyone capable of that. They'd have to be enormously powerful, and unearthly rich as well as incredibly scared to hide all of their actions. Probably right, but I was just throwing it out there as an interesting, what if, said the blonde ninja, effectively ending the conversation. Perceptive, thought Kakashi. An interesting theory to be sure. I might request that Shikamaru's unit be sent to the sound again to try and follow the money trail. The two ninja leaned silently against the wall for a moment or two, just watching everyone around them, though Naruto took careful notice of everything Sakura did. It was strangely captivating how she twirled her bangs as she listened to Tsunade's hushed voice, or how when something was said that obviously bothered her she would shift her weight to her left. By the time he realized how closely he was watching her, nearly a quarter of an hour had passed. Naruto, Tsunade called from across the room, shattering the relatively quiet atmosphere that had been building for the past 20 minutes. Come over here. Kakashi watched silently as Naruto stood up straight and calmly walked over to the Hokage's inner circle. The boy didn't greet any of the Junin, and ignored the ANBU, except for Shikamaru, who he nodded to as he passed. The blonde arrived without saying a word and just stood next to the wall. All of the gathered Junin, plus Jiraiya, turned to watch Naruto carefully. At first it just seemed like they were curious, but after several minutes had passed and no one had spoken, Naruto began to wonder what they were all thinking, or if this was some kind of test. "Anything I can do for you?" he asked flatly, but not mockingly. Tsunade was the first to speak, walking out of the midst of the gathered ninja and positioning herself next to Naruto to face her subordinates. "This meeting is over," she said sternly. "All of you are free to go back about your business, but don't talk to anyone about anything that was discussed here. You know your duties." On that note, the Junin began to slowly make their way to the door, and it occurred to Naruto that while Tsunade had been dismissing and the Anbu had already left. Soon it was only the Hokage, Naruto, Sakura, Jiraiya, and Kakashi left in the office, and they were all glancing around at one another. All except Naruto, he stood perfectly calm. "I wasn't lying when I said it was good to have you back," said Tsunade, walking around her desk and sitting in her chair. "I would have been more polite, but frankly I've become so tired of pleasantries these past months that I no longer even bother to use them." "Understood," said Naruto, wanting to get right to the point. "You had said you wanted to speak with me." "Yes, I did," said the Hokage. She looked between Kakashi and Sakura, then addressed them directly. "Would you be so kind as to let us to our business? The three of us have important matters to discuss." Kakashi nodded immediately and turned to leave, but Sakura didn't move. "With all due respect, Hokage-sama," said the Kunoichi, "I'd like to be here." Kakashi glanced over his shoulder as he crossed the room but stopped at the open door. He watched as Tsunade eyed her student warily and finally nodded. Sakura took a seat in one of the chairs opposite Tsunade while Jiraiya and Naruto remained standing. The copy nin breathed a sigh of relief as he quietly closed the door behind him and left. "I don't need to explain the situation to you, do I, Naruto?" Tsunade asked. "I think I have the general idea," said the blonde. "Between Kakashi, Sakura, and Neji filling me in on little bits and pieces, and everyone I hear whispering about war, one can guess that things are stressed right now." "Then I won't bore you with overviews," said Tsunade. "The mist and cloud are allying themselves with the sound. They're readying to attack the sand and draw us into a war. That's the gist of the matter anyway. And if that happens, then a lot of people are going to Naruto interrupted. "Innocent people." "Yes," said Tsunade, checking her irritation. "And with Orochimaru involved and orchestrating everything," said Jiraiya to Naruto, "there's no chance that politics do anything. Negotiation is worthless at this point. The mist made that perfectly clear." "Kakashi already told me this," said Naruto. "But we have to keep face and look like we're trying to maintain diplomatic relations," said Tsunade. "Otherwise it will come across that we're warmongers and the other villages, the smaller ones, might side against us. At the same time, though, we have to begin preparing." The pink-haired Kunoichi's eyes narrowed as she listened, her ears taking in every last mark of stress in the Sanin's voice. Her fingers were carefully tousling a single lock of hair that drd down across the face. "As fascinating as this is," said Naruto, "it still doesn't explain why you wanted to see me. Could we get to the crux of that matter, as it's a little more immediate?" Sakura bit her lip, watching Tsunade carefully. "Fine," said the Hokage, tonelessly. "Naruto, Jiraiya has told me that over the past 3 years you've developed into an elite ninja, equal to if not greater than any of the Junin in Konoha. Not only that, but he tells me that you have a masterful understanding of tactics both in open combat and in covert operations. Given my trust in Jiraiya's opinions and for those reasons, I'm offering you an immediate promotion to the level of Junin." "Accepted," said Naruto without hesitation, "but there's more to this than simply advancing my rank." "You're right," said Tsunade. "Consider yourself promoted, and now that you're a Junin, I can bring you totally up to speed on the situation. You see, there are details that no one except the Junin are allowed to know, or to tell to anyone else." "Pretty secret," commented Naruto. "They have to be, and as a matter of fact what I'm about to tell you hasn't even been revealed to anyone outside this room with the exception of Shikamaru, and that's only because he was the one who risked his life to find out." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Orochimaru has resurrected the fourth Hokage," said Tsunade, staring directly at Naruto. The boy didn't flinch, but he did cross his arms. For a long minute the room was engulfed in silence. Tsunade and Naruto seemed to be trying to stare one another down, while Sakura and Jiraiya merely looked off into space. It was obvious that both the Hokages and the newly appointed Junins' minds were racing. Thoughts that ran along similar veins burned behind their eyes. I wondered why you looked so bothered, said Naruto to Jiraiya finally. I guess this is the reason. Yeah, the Sannin in red nodded. Tsunade told me the news about an hour before the meeting started. There's more to it than this, but it'll be obvious soon. How do you think the public would react if they knew the fourth was back and on Orochimaru's side? Asked Tsunade. Well, they probably wouldn't take it too well, said Naruto sarcastically. This isn't the time to joke, said Jiraiya. Can't you see this is a serious matter? It's not that big of a deal, Jiraiya, said Naruto. We all know that Orochimaru's rebirthed puppets are barely a shell of their former selves. This fake fourth can't be any different, so what's the issue? He's sure to be easy prey for someone like you. Hell, I'll bet even I could take him with a little luck. This isn't the same kind of cheap copy you're used to, Naruto, said Tsunade. Orochimaru hasn't just sealed the fourth soul into some ramshackle body. He's been working tirelessly these last 3 years, and actually reconstructed the fourth's body exactly. It's like he never SD. The fourth Hokage, Namikaze Minato, is back at full strength and he's our enemy. Naruto hesitated and 3 sets of eyes fell on him. How's that possible? Asked the blonde. The fourth soul was consumed by Shinigami. There's no way. Orochimaru struck a deal with Shinigami, said Jiraiya. Shikamaru couldn't uncover the details, but suffice it to say that the evidence is irrefutable. Naruto froze. A cold chill ran down his spine at the same time that a bead of sweat broke out on his brow. And it only gets worse, said Jiraiya. Sakura glanced between Naruto and the Hokage for just a second before speaking up. You didn't tell me any of this, said the Kunoichi, but how can it possibly get worse? Naruto, said Tsunade, you remember the events leading up to and following the Chunin exams 3 years ago? I don't doubt. Her voice lowered as if she were afraid the walls might somehow betray the secret. The release of the Hyuga demon and your battle with Hinata. I make every effort not to think about it, said Naruto, his voice suddenly uneasy and quaking. But yes. Then, as much as it may pain you to hear it, Orochimaru has brought back the demon, or is at least trying to if he hasn't succeeded already. The room fell quiet. Deathly silence drd over everything like a burial shroud as Naruto turned to face away from everyone. None of the ninja could see Naruto's face, but neither did they miss that his hands were balled into white-knuckled fists. From Sakura's perspective, as she sat nearest him, it seemed that Naruto's skin seemed stretched, like too little fabric over too large a frame. Then in that case we're all screwed, said the boy quietly. Sakura's breath caught in her tea. Naruto's voice had suddenly become dark, less human and more animal than she'd ever heard it before. There was even a hint of an echo in the words that seemed so pronounced to her ears, despite the small, carpeted room. Maybe not, said the Hokage. For all this, we have 2 advantages left to us still. Which would be? Naruto asked, the bone-chilling echo still pervading his voice. First, said Tsunade, raising one finger, we know of all of this in advance. Due to Shikamaru's efforts, and supreme abilities as an infiltrator, we have access to knowledge that we would otherwise be dangerously unaware of. Knowledge is power, and we now have a general idea of what Orochimaru plans to hit us with. And, Naruto pressed. And secondly is Sasuke, said the Hokage bluntly. Again the room slipped into silence as she let Naruto and Sakura digest the implications. Jiraiya glanced at his old teammate as if to impart some kind of cautionary warning, then went back to his thoughts and staring at the cluttered docents on the desk. What about Sasuke? Asked Sakura hesitantly. Apparently he's fighting Orochimaru's control and has been for the past 3 years, the Hokage muttered. We're not sure to what extent he is capable of deviating from Orochimaru's will, but we do know that he hates his master. How do we know? Naruto asked, his voice controlled again. How do you think I managed to survive in Orochimaru's complex? A somber and somewhat nasal voice echoed from the corner of the room opposite Tsunade. Naruto turned around to see a tall figure, dressed entirely in black, excepting a white bird mask, sitting in a chair. His legs were crossed and there was an unlit cigarette in his left hand. With his right, the figure reached up and removed the Anbu mask. It was Shikamaru. I've been here the whole time, said the Anbu ninja, and I didn't even use any ninjutsu or genjutsu to hide my presence, just simple silence and avoidance of attention. However, even my skills would not have been able to get me into Orochimaru's complex without help. I'll let Shikamaru explain, said a calm Tsunade. The Anbu ninja leaned forward, uncrossing his legs and resting his elbows on his knees. Simply put, he began, I was assigned to spy on Orochimaru directly. Tsunade was confident in my abilities, so I went for it. When I arrived in the Sound, which has grown into a large village by the way, I found the entrance to Orochimaru's base with minimal difficulty. Sneaking past the guards and alarms was easy enough, but once I reached the inner complex, where he himself works, I began having to rely on my most advanced tricks just to remain hidden, much less find anything out. I knew it was only a matter of time before I was caught. After all, Sasuke could see me with his Mangekyo, and despite my invisibility jutsu, Orochimaru would be aware of me if he ever got near, but luckily I avoided close proximity. Then my luck ran out, or so I thought. I was watching Orochimaru work on what I had determined to be the body of the fourth Hokage, when Uchiha Sasuke appeared right in front of me. He looked me right in the eye and grinned. That's when I knew it was over. Sakura listened intently, as did Naruto. But he didn't do anything, said Shikamaru. Sasuke just turned around and began talking to Orochimaru. Then out of nowhere a shadow clone of the Uchiha appeared and announced that he was communicating with me through a genjutsu. He told me all about Orochimaru's plan to raise the fourth and the Hyuga demon, along with some unidentified, deceased ninja who was to serve as the demon's vessel. Sasuke's clone said he didn't have much time and he couldn't keep Orochimaru from noticing his unusual brain activity for long, and told me to run back to Konoha. I told Sasuke through shadows on the floor that I wasn't leaving without proof. Sasuke then said he'd lead Orochimaru from the room and that I could take all the proof I needed. Almost instantly, the genjutsu faded and I found myself alone in Orochimaru's labs. Sasuke had lead him out. Sakura stood up and walked over beside Naruto. She leaned up and whispered something in his ear that none of the others could make out, then went back and sat down in her chair. So you're saying Sasuke is on our side? Asked Naruto after a moment. Yes and no, said the Anbu, leaning back in the chair. No, in the sense that he can't disobey Orochimaru's direct command, and he doesn't have a choice but to do everything he's told to. Yes, in that if Orochimaru's concentration wavers enough or breaks, Sasuke will have a window of opportunity to completely free himself of Orochimaru's influence. He'd come back to Konoha in a heartbeat if he had the chance, I think. He skewered me through the heart, said Naruto flatly. And then saved you, counted Tsunade. He works for Orochimaru now, Naruto persisted. Against his will, said Shikamaru. Naruto bit his lip. Even so, I don't think it would be wise to trust him. I don't disagree with that, said Tsunade. At this point he is still an enemy and should be treated as such. However, what we're saying is that there's a slim chance that Sasuke might defect back to Konoha, in which case we could forcibly remove his seal. What's more, he might even turn on Orochimaru. Naruto thought it over for a minute before he answered. If it comes down to war, which it looks to, he said, you can bank on the fact that I'll be on the front lines. If I run into Sasuke, I will K him. Everyone was silent, staring at Naruto and the hard lines that suddenly appeared on his countenance. Naruto, Sakura thought, that isn't like you at all. I wouldn't ask for anything different, said the Hokage. Unless Sasuke directly attacks Orochimaru or surrenders and asks to be brought home, I expect that you K him if you get the chance. He's not an ally until that seal is either taken care of, or Orochimaru is K'd. But you must admit, Jiraiya chimed in, drawing all of their attention, it would be nice if we didn't have to K Sasuke. Bringing him back to us would be so much better for everyone, I think. Tsunade and Sakura nodded in agreement, but Naruto didn't respond. Rather, he turned to stare out the window into the quickly darkening sky. The strangely thick whisker lines across his face deepened just a bit as a grimace crossed his face. Keep it under control, he thought to himself. You don't need yet another complication. Our greatest advantage still, said Shikamaru, is that we know. Now that we see what Orochimaru plans to throw at us, we can plan for it, counter it, and perhaps even turn it to our advantage. SC. Hey, Teary, pass me some of that, would you? Asked one of the three ninjas sitting around a small campfire. Sure thing, Namatsu, said the silver-haired ninja, reaching over and handing the rather stocky but still well-built man a can of soup. It was a relatively calm night in the forest just outside the Fire Country's southern border. There was no wind to speak of, and the only noise in the woods besides the cooking fire was the hooting of summer owls in the distance. 3 ninja, each wearing a leaf insignia on some part of their uniform, sat around eating out of ration cans and talking about their last mission. Thierry, evidently the youngest and also the shortest of the group, was busy wolfing down a can of pork and beans, while Namatsu, the largest in stature there, ate quietly on some fruit. The third ninja was by far the most average, not exceptionally tall or unique, with drab brown hair and hazy green eyes. He was quietly leaning up against the base of one of the massive oak trees that surrounded them. Hey Nagamata, said Namatsu, aren't you going to eat? I'm probably not going to finish this. If you're still hungry and want the rest, you can have it. Nah, no thanks, but I appreciate it, said Nagamata quietly. I think I've lost my appetite. Understandable, said Thierry, it's not every day you have to make your first K for the sake of a mission. But you did good. That sound bastard never saw it coming, and since there were no witnesses, no one can pin it on Konoha. I guess, said Nagamata, leaning back and staring at the sky. Still, I wish there had been some other way. King people just seem so wrong. Then you're in the wrong profession, said Namatsu. His voice was understanding, but he was pointing his fork at the third ninja. That can be a big part of this job at times, so you need to get used to it. I know. The 3 of them concentrated on finishing eating, until Nagamata stood up and set his unopened dinner on a nearby branch. I'm going to have a quick look around, said the ninja, just to be on the safe side. Fine, do what you want, said Thierry, leaning over and throwing a handful of dirt on the fire to lower it. But nothing ever happens as far south as this, so don't get your hopes up for any action. Nagamata nodded and jumped off into the darkness. That must have been really hard on him, said Namatsu when he was sure their companion was out of earshot. The first K always is, said Thierry. But he really did do quite well. Nagamata scanned the forest carefully as he silently raced through it, taking note of everything around. Before long he had done no less than 5 laps around their campsite, making sure that there was nothing within nearly a kilometer of their position. All he had found were owls and a few other silent animals. Everything seemed perfectly still in the forest. The leaf nin stopped in a tree about 40 feet above the ground, perching like an eagle and staring blankly down into the undergrowth. Maybe I should head back, he mumbled to himself. I wouldn't want him to. A quiet rustle silenced Nagamata, and immediately drew his attention to a small break in the trees a few meters to his left. As quietly as he could, given the dense, coarse moss growing all over the tree's branches, the nin slunk to the edge of the limb and reached out to part the leaves, which grew unusually thickly for this time of year. Nagamata leaned forward and peered through the break in the leaves, and found he was hidden on the edge of a small clearing in the forest, a clearing occupied by no less than 80 people, all dressed in blue fatigues and sitting around, among 4 or 5 dozen small, camouflaged pup tents. No one in the camp was speaking, just silently waiting. What the hell? Wondered the ninja, craning his end to get a better look. Who are all of you now? Nagamata decided to risk a small jutsu, and performed a few quick seals, concentrating the newly molded chakra behind his eyes. The leaf nin's vision quickly focused and, like a telephoto lens, zoomed in on the encampment. He scanned the faces of those gathered, but the vast majority were wearing masks of one kind or another, and those that weren't had their faces painted with dull camouflage. Kiri nin, Nagamata blurted when he caught sight of one forehead protector, boldly emblazoned with the mist's insignia. What are they doing this far? He cut himself off as realization flooded over him. Hissed the leaf nin, his hands shaking, I've got to warn the others. Kiri is on the warpath already. We're out of time. Nagamata quietly but quickly let go of the branches and they silently slipped back into place. The leaf nin turned around, snuck to the trunk of the tree and lowered himself down to the ground. He cast a simple silencing jutsu on his feet and then he ran as fast as his legs would allow. The wind slapped around him as he sped back towards his team's small camp. Guys, he gasped, breaking through the brush less than a minute later. We've got serious problems. Kiri is. There was no one there. The little camp was empty. The stones surrounding their little cooking fire were still in place, but they were cold and the flames had been extinguished. There was no sign of either Tiri or Namatsu in the gloomy dark. This isn't the time for joking, hisses Nagamata. There's big trouble and we're right in the middle of it. Yes, you're right, said a deathly voice that seemed to emanate from all around the Leaf Nin. Nagamata froze. His eyes widened and his muscles locked up as the overwhelmingly powerful, and evil, aura of chakra overloaded his mind, making escape nearly impossible. And you're right in the middle of it. All Nagamata saw as he forced himself to look around was a flicker of platinum blonde, and a flash of white-hot energy, before nothing at all. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.